The story of David. This story portrays the noble qualities of a young boy named David who was raised by God from being a shepherd to the king of Israel. This story also reveals that God will raise us to unknown heights if we are faithful to Him. Here I am presenting you the story of David. Once there lived a judge named Samuel who ruled Israel. As he grew old, the Israelites requested him to appoint a king to rule over them. Realizing their expectations, God instructed Samuel to anoint a man named Saul as their king. As soon as Samuel anointed Saul, the Spirit of God took control of Saul and he became a different person. Saul, as a king, won many battles because the power of God was with him. But as years rolled on, Saul turned away from God and disobeyed him. Due to this, the Spirit of God abandoned him and an evil spirit tormented him. God felt sorry for making Saul as the king of Israel. He decided to appoint a new king. So he instructed Samuel to go to Bethlehem in search of a man named Jesse and anoint one of his sons as the future king. When Samuel saw Jesse's son Eliab, who was handsome and tall, he felt that he was the one chosen by God. But God said to Samuel, "I do not judge as a man judges. I look only at the heart of a man and not his outward appearance." In this way, all the 7 sons of Jesse were brought in front of Samuel, but they were rejected by God. Finally, the youngest son David, who was a shepherd, was brought before Samuel, and God said to him, "He is the one whom I have chosen." So Samuel anointed David. Immediately, the Spirit of God took control of David and was with him from that day onwards. Meanwhile, a war broke out between the Philistines and the Israelites. In the Philistine army, there was a giant named Goliath who was 3 meters tall. Goliath put forth an open challenge to all the Israelites. He invited any one man from the Israelite army to fight with him and defeat him. In that case, he promised that all the Philistines would become their slaves. But on the other hand, if he won, all the Israelites have to become the slaves of the Philistines. But no one dared to face him because he was a giant, and in no time he will tear them into pieces. On hearing this, David met Saul and said to him that he was ready to face Goliath. But Saul was baffled and thought, how is it possible for a shepherd boy to fight against a mighty soldier? But David convinced him, stating that he himself had killed many lions and bears which tried to attack his sheep. He strongly believed that the same God who saved him from those wild animals would save him from Goliath too. Without any weapon, David took his stick and picked 5 smooth stones and went towards Goliath. Seeing David, Goliath mocked him. But David replied, "You have come to fight with me with your sword and spear, but I have come to fight with you in the name of the Lord Almighty. Today the Lord will put you in my power and I will defeat you." Saying so, David took out a stone from his bag and flung at him. It hit him on his forehead and broke his skull. He fell face downwards on the ground. Immediately, David took Goliath's sword and killed him. When the Philistines' army saw that their hero was dead, they ran away in fear. Therefore, the Israelites won the battle. The women of Israel sang joyful songs and danced to celebrate this victory. Saul overheard the lyrics of the song, which said, King Saul killed 1,000 men, but David killed 10,000s. Saul was not happy with this and felt jealous of David. He became scared that one day the people might make David the king. But Saul clearly understood that the Spirit of God was with David. So he requested David to serve him as a loyal soldier and fight all the battles for him. David agreed, and he was more successful than any other officials in the kingdom. As a result, David became very famous. Even though David was faithful to Saul and had due reverence for him, Saul envied David. Also, some of Saul's officials gave deceptive information to him that one day David might kill him and conquer his throne. Saul felt that David would be a constant threat to his dynasty, so he decided to kill him. On hearing this, David escaped from Saul. After this, Saul made several attempts to kill David, but he failed. But on the other hand, even though David had several opportunities to harm Saul, he did not do it because he felt that it was a sin to harm anyone anointed by God. One day, as Saul was returning from the battlefield, David got the right opportunity to kill him near a cave. Even though David's men provoked him to kill Saul, his inner conscience did not allow him to do so. However, David met Saul and said to him, I have no thought of rebelling against you or harming you. Then why are you hunting down to kill me? Even now, when I got an opportunity to kill you, I did not do so. On hearing this, Saul realized his mistake and cried. He said, Yes, you are right. You have been so good to me while I always wanted to harm you. May God bless you. But please promise me that you will spare my descendants. David promised that he would do so. Then both of them went to their respective place. After a while, in a battle between the Philistines and the Israelites, Saul and 3 of his sons were killed. On hearing this news, David cried and mourned for several days. After a while, all the leaders of Israel met David and requested him to be their king. So David became the king at the age of 30 and he ruled over Israel for 40 years. He always consulted God and followed his instructions. Since God was with David, he grew stronger and had victory in all his endeavors. Reflection. What do we learn from the life of Saul? When Saul was anointed, he was filled with the Holy Spirit and was transformed into a new man. In the same way, when the Holy Spirit is with us, we will be transformed into a new person with noble qualities. Hence, we should always pray to God to fill us with the power of the Holy Spirit. When the Holy Spirit is with us, we will be successful in all our endeavors. Since King Saul disobeyed God, the Spirit of God abandoned him and an evil spirit took control of him. In the same way, if we adhere to the commandments of God, the Holy Spirit will be with us and guide us. But if we sin and move away from God, the Holy Spirit will abandon us. As long as the Holy Spirit is with us, no evil spirit can approach us. So we have to be cautious not to sin. Moreover, since the Spirit of God left Saul, he developed undesirable qualities such as jealousy, hatred, which eventually led to an attempt of murder. So, we should weed off any negative quality at the sprouting stage itself, or else it will replicate and attract other deadly sins. Since the Holy Spirit was not with Saul, he believed the false information given by his officials about David. Even though David was loyal to Saul, he was not able to realize it. On the other hand, we see that even when David's men strongly provoked him to kill Saul, he did not do so because the Spirit of God in him counseled him not to do so. Therefore, if the Spirit of God is with us, He will give us the wisdom to differentiate between the good and the evil in our day-to-day life. Moreover, it was the fear for his throne which led Saul to envy David. In this world, we should not be possessive on objects or people around us. Possessiveness will eventually lead to greed. Fear is an outcome of sin. It comes from the evil. If there is a fear in our mind, then it leads to a conclusion that the Spirit of God is not with us. What do we learn from the life of David? Even though David's brothers were handsome and tall, God chose only David because he had a pure heart. God does not judge anyone by their outward appearance. So we should ensure that we always have a pure heart, and God will reward us at the right time. Also, David had unshakable faith in God. He believed that the same God who rescued him from wild animals will save him from Goliath too. Belief is the most important aspect of spiritual life. Whenever we face a dreadful problem in our life, instead of being panicked, we should strongly believe that the same God who led us through numerous difficulties for so many years in our life will help us to pass through this terrible situation too. No matter how strong our enemy is, God will save us. David always consulted God before going for any battle. He proceeded based on the instructions given by God and thereby won many battles. In our life, we may be struggling to take certain decisions. In such situations, we should consult God and ask for His intervention. When we subject ourselves to God, He will show us unknown ways which the human mind cannot perceive. It was only the unconditional love of David which made Saul realize his mistake at the end. David loved him to such an extent that finally Saul felt ashamed of himself. This unconditional love was inherited by David from God. To forgive the person who has wronged you and to love him is the greatest quality of mankind. Instead of lamenting over the people who have wronged you, hand over them to God and He will take care of them. On hearing the news of Saul's death, David did not feel happy. Instead, he was shocked and he cried. This shows that he was a noble man. It was because of such noble qualities God raised him from being a shepherd to the king of Israel. Finally, we conclude that if we live a life with noble qualities, God will raise us to unknown heights which is far beyond our imagination. Thank you for watching this video. May God bless you. To get new video updates, please subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon.